Hi everybody, it's Jay and I'm back again with another special sneak peek preview video for you in a series that we're calling New Releases You Might Have Missed. When we launched our YouTube channel a little over 2 months ago, most of our content was previously released audiobooks, but we had a handful of new releases, and because of the hubbub of the new channel and all that, they didn't get any kind of individual promotion. And we're taking care of that today. Before I get started though, please, if you haven't already, consider subscribing to our channel. It helps us a great deal, and it helps us notify you when we have new audiobooks available. It's simple too. Just click on that little red button right there. All there is to it. Okay, today's sneak peek preview is Heartland Holidays. It's the 6th book in Jessie's Heartland Cowboy Christmas series, and I have to say, it's one of my favorites. Like all of the books in this series, it's a strong faith-based message full of fun and family and, of course, romance. It's the story of Jefferson Connolly and Candace McCloskey. Candace is the oldest of 3 sisters who live and work on their family farm after it was left to them following the tragic death of their parents in an accident. The farm is in trouble, though, and Candace, as the oldest, feels like it's her responsibility to save the farm, so she comes up with a plan to do just that. The story opens on the morning of Esther, the youngest sister's wedding, to Monroe Connolly, who happens to be the younger brother of Jefferson. The morning of the wedding, Candace puts her plan into action. I don't want to spoil any more of the plot, so let's listen to that opening scene of Heartland Holidays. Chapter 1. Could she do it? Candace lifted her chin and stared at her target. Jefferson Connolly, the 3rd eldest brother in the Connolly family. He stood in a group with his brothers, his arms crossed across his chest, the only one who wasn't laughing. He wasn't talking at all. That was the main reason she picked him. He seemed serious, driven, and a part of the group, but not necessarily a part of the conversation. He didn't seem like the kind of man who got hung up on emotions or matters of the heart. He'd be reasonable, analytical. He'd see the reason in her proposition and be able to tell her that she was offering him something valuable and worth the small sacrifice he'd need to make. She could also probably pull him away without anyone noticing, if she had the nerve to go through with the plan that she had cooked up 2 months ago, as her sister Esther planned her wedding to Jefferson's brother Monroe. Her baby shifted, and Candace put an automatic hand over her stomach. Just 3 more months until her due date. She was running out of time. Once the baby was here, rather than being able to help her sisters on the farm, she would be a liability. Someone her sisters would have to help. Someone who needed things instead of someone who was able to give things. But the plan she'd come up with would enable her to give her sisters a lifelong gift. If Jefferson agreed. "You'd better not let Esther see that look on your face. She's not going to think you're happy about her marriage if she does." Her sister Meg spoke next to her ear, low enough that no one else would hear. They were standing outside the small Sunday school room in the basement of the church, waiting for Catherine, Esther's future sister-in-law, to get done fixing her hair. Candace had stepped out of the room, hoping to catch Jefferson, whom she decided was her best bet after looking the brothers over last night at the rehearsal dinner. Unfortunately, Meg had decided to step out with her. She hadn't yet figured out how to get rid of her sister, so she could go and make a proposition that had the potential to completely change her life. Her stomach churned, and she was grateful she hadn't eaten any breakfast. "Are you okay?" Meg asked, tilting her head and looking at her with eyes that saw far too much. "I am. I think it was the hair chemicals that were making me a little queasy. Would you mind going back in so Esther isn't by herself?" That wasn't a total lie. The smell of the hair products really had been bothering her. But she really hated that she'd exaggerated how much they were affecting her, leaving her sister alone on her wedding day. "Are you going to be okay?" Meg asked, concern written all over her face. Candace nodded, feeling grateful and guilty as those emotions warred in her chest. Grateful because both of her sisters had been nothing but supportive after finding out that she was expecting. They had respected her non-answers and hadn't pried, not too hard anyway, when she'd refused to talk about the father. The thought of the father of her baby sent more waves of apprehension through her. That was another one of her wild schemes that had gone miserably awry. Not that she was known for wild schemes. The one that she was hoping to embark on today was only the second one she'd tried in her entire adult life. Currently, she was 0 for 1. "I'll be fine," she said, knowing her words came too late. Meg's lips pressed together firmly, and her eyes narrowed. But then the group of men in the middle of the large, open church basement broke into laughter, and her eyes went to them before she glanced back at the closed door. "I'd probably better check on Esther." She bit her lip, obviously not wanting to leave. "I'll be right in. I think I might just walk outside and grab a few quick, deep breaths to clear my head." Meg nodded, her gaze thoughtful. But she didn't question Candace again, walking down the hall and slipping into the Sunday school room, keeping the door closed as much as possible. It wouldn't do for the groom to see his bride. Monroe stood over with his brothers and seemed to be the butt of most of their jokes. The circle had shifted, and now Jefferson stood slightly back and behind everyone else. He hadn't laughed with that last outburst, and he had his hands shoved in his pockets, leaning a shoulder against the metal supporting beam that broke up the middle of the room. Lifting her chin and straightening her shoulders, Candace walked toward him, hoping she would be able to speak to him without being noticed. She didn't want to have to answer a bunch of questions, and she didn't want him teased, or worse, she didn't want anyone telling her sisters that she'd pulled him aside. Especially if he said no to her proposition. As had been her lot in life, lately anyway, the entire room grew quiet, and all eyes fastened on her as she stopped beside Jefferson. Two of the brothers, at the prompting of the guys who were standing facing her, even turned halfway around. The better to see her, she supposed. Well, this wasn't working out the way she had planned, but she wasn't going to abandon her course of action just because everything wasn't going her way. The group had gotten so quiet, she was pretty sure they could all hear her heart thumping in her chest. Her breath sounded loud to her ears, too. Regardless, sometimes a person just had to fake it until they made it. This seemed like one of those times, so she kept her face serious, her bearing confident, and cleared her throat before she said as boldly as she could, "Jefferson, if you have a few minutes, I'd like to step outside with you. I have a question I need to ask you." She almost didn't add that last explanation, but while most of the ladies she knew would be mature enough not to titter at her asking a man to step outside with her, she didn't have as much confidence in men. In her experience, some of them never matured past junior high level. Jefferson, who hadn't looked up as she'd gotten within 3 paces of him, didn't blink, but his eyebrows raised. His face, never losing that serious look, didn't even twitch with the idea of a smile. She would not allow that to bother her, holding his eyes with hers, allowing her face to give away nothing of her inner turmoil, and the fact that she was scared to death that he was going to refuse her, not just dashing her very last hope, but embarrassing her in front of the entire group of men who stood and stared. He never did say anything, but he jerked his chin and his brow twitched, and then he turned and strode toward the door. She would not hurry after him, but walked, as confidently as she could, behind him. To his credit, when he reached the door, he held it open for her, allowing her to walk out first. She did so without looking at him, walking straight ahead, away from the church into where the cars were parked in the parking lot, hoping for some privacy. She didn't turn until she'd passed 3. Then she cut in between an old farm truck and a new, sporty car. Something that looked expensive, although she didn't know enough about cars to know what kind. She barely noticed the sweet blue sky, the gentle April breeze, the fresh spring scent. Normally, this was her favorite time of year. A time for new beginnings and fresh starts. A time for planning and hoping for an expected harvest in the fall. A time of busyness and work she loved. This year had been busy with all the normal things, planting and working in their family's hog barns, but there were too many unknowns about the future for Candace to enjoy it much. Maybe this conversation would settle some of them, but it would dig up more. She ignored that very logical statement in her head and focused on the cowboy in front of her. Tall and loose, he projected a relaxed confidence that she envied, especially now. She felt like she was wound tight and hard, and her fixed exterior could crack at any moment. Maybe that's why she blurted out the first sentence the way she did. "Would you marry me?" Hi, this is Jay, and thanks for listening. If you're ready for another great audiobook, here's one we think you might like. Or check out the playlist with all our latest releases. Don't forget to subscribe to Say with Jay, give this video a thumbs up, and tell us what you liked in the comments.